All right. Hey, we're back. Cabbage Cafe doing another Facebook Live. And it looks as though it's pretty likely that we'll also be back, including the Cave Radio platform again. And Jim, move your camera or your phone the other direction, man. You're throwing me off.
You're kind of like frozen or something.
Yeah. All right. So, and also there's a YouTube.
Is that better?
Not yet. It might be frozen or something. They'll see. And also there's a YouTube channel that that Rick's been working on and getting a lot of content in, and that'll be another platform, and that'll continue to grow and get organized and stuff like that. But there's a lot of stuff there now, so check it out. And we keep on adding to this. I wanted to mention the other shows that we're kind of been working in conjunction with a lot too. Planet Green Trees and Medical Mondays. Reeds and Weeds, I guess, and like Ryan Basor is planning on doing a show, and there are others too. And I just think these are all complementary to each other, and they offer a venue to talk about things in different ways. Sometimes it's the same subject matter. If everybody can mute their mics too, I think sometimes it's the same subject matter, and but we get a different take on it and stuff like that. So, today we're going to have Dr. Detroit, Professor Mike Whitty with us. And he's got some important messages that he's sharing in a lot of places. He'll be on Planet Green Trees Thursday night, but we'll talk about a lot of stuff with him here today in a little bit. And Nicole Braeden, who is a candidate for State House representative seat for the 43rd district. She's in like northern Oakland County area. Will be joining us too. We've been trying to highlight some of the candidates that are going on. Rick's been doing his news also, like standalone on Saturdays on Facebook Live, and that's been working out pretty well. And then we've been replaying it on here, and a lot of the stuff that, it's still very, very relevant. So it's been working out well like that. So we will do that too. I want to point out that appropriately in Pride Month, there is just an excellent Supreme Court ruling on discrimination in the workplace for people who are gay, LGBTQ community. Dr. Whitty's going to bring it up a little bit, and on Thursday night, Zara Abbas is going to be on Planet Green Trees to discuss it more in depthly. But there is a reforming of the Democratic Cannabis Caucus. Also, the roadside swab pilot program that started off in 5 counties is now still a pilot program, but it has expanded statewide. We'll talk about that, and I don't know if we'll get to some of the stuff later on, but another swipe at like the concept of just relying on the THC number as a barometer of potency or strength or quality or something like that on a recent study about concentrates and how that could be misleading has come out. And we've talked about that before. And on Medical Mondays last night, Berg brought up THCP, which in the whole formula thing calls into question some of the reliance on those numbers. Also, there's been an executive order recently based on there being a lot of support and need for police reform. That's been a need for a long time. There's executive order creating a citizens panel to work with MCOL as oversight. And we'll talk about that a little bit more and who MCOL is and stuff like that. And the Attorney General recently just put out I think it was like a 7-step program for reforming policing as well. So there's a lot of things. So I'm going to turn over this to Rick to let us know who's here, and with a question based on what we're seeing now and how it's developing and how this has been ongoing. How do people here believe the current protests and uprising and things that are taking place as a result are going to actually result in really substantive change finally after centuries and decades of kind of lip service on this issue? Are we really looking at real change now? Hey Rick, what do you think, and how's it going?
It's going all right. What we've seen already is real change is already happening. Things like the removal of statues that celebrate slavery, the removal of rules that are protective of individuals that do bad things, a sea change when it comes to altering the way that we view law enforcement. And some of the changes are actually to law enforcement's benefit. You're seeing now a move to have social workers accompany law enforcement when they have sensitive issues, for example, with homeless people or with people who aren't necessarily fit. And that's an area that we've asked law enforcement to deal with, that they were never trained or never intended to be used. So I honestly believe the protest has resulted in a lot of positive change. I think it's impractical for us to expect that change would happen immediately, that it would be complete, and that it would be overnight. So seeing some of the leftovers of the bad time still there, it's not surprising. But police chiefs are quitting their jobs because their people won't listen to the new rules that they want to give them. Officers are quitting because they don't want to follow the new rules that they're being given. This is a cleansing process. This is the way that we flush the system and get new blood in there. Colin, you're always up on things. I'm distracted by Shelly all of a sudden. Colin, you're so CMAC, you heard the question, right? Are the protests arriving change, bringing change to the forefront? And if not, what do we need to do in order to make that happen?
Yeah, I think that the protests are definitely making some strides. I know that in Minneapolis, they've like completely are at the point where they're disbanding their police department entirely. But like kind of like I said last week, I think that there's like this weird structure of how there's like so many different police forces, and how like around in Southeast Michigan, there's like just small cities that each have their own police force. I think that it just needs to be like consolidated and like shrinking in a way. I know that Dearborn's kind of like trying to start taking some stuff and with their budget. And there's a town hall tonight that I was gonna just be on Zoom, where they're gonna talk about it with my state rep and state senator. I think that there needs to be a lot more done, especially like with the drug war, and that's why I'm on the decriminalized nature bandwagon, and just trying to continue to rid of these scheduled substances that usually cause the most harm and lead to the worst police interactions, I think, and kind of allow the police to interact with us in a manner that we don't really want to be interacted with.
Well, we've seen a lot of police agencies wielding power that allows them to get certain privileges. Police unions have negotiated features of their contracts which prevent police officers from being interviewed by leadership after an incident, that hide some of the details from the public and that shield them from prosecution. Jim Salame, I hope you're not parked at a Wendy's, man. But I'm just gonna say, this is such a big issue. It's hard to get your mind around all of aspects of it. So let's just grab onto one aspect of it. Are these protests bringing about change, and the change that we're seeing, is it superficial or durable?
Well, whether or not it's durable remains to be seen. But I think there's a lot of sincerity to it in the United States and around the globe. I mean, seeing things like in South Korea, or in the Philippines, or just anywhere else other than the United States, I think speaks highly to, the repression and some of the things that are occurring, not just in the United States, but globally. And I think that alone really helps that change and that mountain grow bigger, and that momentum get stronger. So I think change it's inevitable. It's just I think we want to make sure that we don't alienate people. I don't want to alienate law enforcement. I want to make them better. And I think that's what's lacking here right now is we need to all get on the same side.
Giving greater tools is a benefit as long as the people wielding the tools are trustworthy. Debra Young, oh man, what a great background. Roxy music, gotta love it.
Here I am.
Deb.
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly you're asking, because I just tuned in. I was a little late. So if you're asking, do I think that the protests are going to are going to show some change with police forces and stuff. Yeah, I think the cops are forced to change. I don't think they're changing because they get it. I think we're forcing them to change. I'm going to repeat what I said last week. I don't feel they're sincere with their I'm on my knees and I understand now. It's too fast. How do you understand when you didn't understand before? I'm looking for a lot of funding to be taken away from the police department. I don't want to defund public safety, but at this point, police force to me is not a public safety. I'm not looking for the police to protect me because I know that they won't. The times I've turned to police to protection, they did not protect me. So I think that the whole thing has to be looked at again. Budgets have to be changed. The police departments don't need all this military equipment. They don't need, I mean, I'm amazed that what 5 million police officers have like this top of the line riot gear. I mean, they've all got all this equipment. From where? From whose money? What kind of thing is going on that our own money is using to kill us? That's how I'm viewing this. So yeah, a lot of change has got to come. The police are gonna drag their feet. They're looking at right now in the public like they're agreeing with us that they agree that they need to change. But I don't buy that at all. We're forcing them to change. They're going to change because we're going to make them change. That's my opinion. If I got the question wrong, I apologize.
You got the question exactly correct. I'll say that Donald Trump today signed legislation, an executive order that said only a tiny fraction of police officers are really doing bad things. So we're not going to adjust police officers. And we're also not going to mention race as part of the reason why we're doing this. So they did some moderately lukewarm things in order to pacify folks.
I watched his press conference, which, by the way, none of him or his staff or any of the people were wearing masks or were social distancing at all. Yeah. I mean, of course, he's a total idiot. And I would like to say it's not just people of color that the police don't protect properly or attack. It's women too, okay? We have been treated like crap by the police for many, 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 many decades. And I'm sure, I mean, they're not killing us in the numbers that they're killing Black people and brown people, but a lot of those Black and brown people have been women. And I've had very bad experiences with cops because and I know it's because I'm a female. So there's a lot of change that's got to happen in this world. Perhaps this is the catalyst for it. If it is, hey, that would be great. If it's not, well, then we just got to keep pushing some more. Now the momentum's up. Now the young kids are pissed. So let's see if that translates into them actually voting in November, like we always hope they will, and they don't. Let's hope that they are so pissed off that they come and vote all these assholes out of there. That's all I can really say about that.
Well, I shared on Medical Mondays last night that I was watching MSNBC and a wonderful person spoke, and she said, when I do meetings, I read off the names of all of these male African Americans that people know, Philando Castile, George Floyd, all of these names. And then I read a second list, a list of females killed by police officers. And people don't recognize any of those names, even though they were just as heinous of a crime as those others. For whatever reason, our society or our media seems to value male life more than females. Shelley, I see that Shelley Smith is joined by Julie Barron, but it looks like they're not in a position to contribute.
Two more really females, sure. Yes.
I know. More voices.
But they have the audacity to be having fun on a day like this.
I know, it's such a tease. Mike Whitty, Dr. Detroit, thank you for joining us for our broadcast today. Typically, when we begin the broadcast, we do go round robin around our panel here and just ask him that one simple question. Do you believe that the protests are actually going to make a big difference? And if so, are those differences going to be durable changes to society?
Yes, durable, because it was black and white together, young and old, all classes. That will be durable. That's intergenerational. We have to salute the radical and idealistic youth. And I was impressed in the 5 different marches I've engaged in the last 10 days to 2 weeks, constantly reassurance that my days at Selma, Alabama with Martin Luther King in 1965 are being revisited, and we will have a good ending here. I'm very much an optimist about making our legacy a great contribution, and cannabis is one of our helpers.
Well, when we talk about legacy, you've certainly got a long history in not just cannabis law reform, but in the Democratic Party. You hang out in California for half the year and here in Michigan for the other half. So you spread the goodness that is Gail, Whitty, and also a little bit of you around the nation. Thank you for doing that. Nicole Braeden, I see that you've joined us, and thank you very much for doing so. We haven't given you a proper introduction. We'll do that in a little bit, but you are running for public office. So I'm very curious to see your opinion about the same thing too. The protests that we've seen in all these cities, to what degree is that having success in moving the minds of lawmakers out there?
Well, I can't say my own lawmaker, that my own state representative, she's made no comment about these protests at all. Nothing regarding Black Lives Matter. But myself, I've attended 4 different demonstrations in the 2 communities that make up the district I'm running for, and I attended a 5th one in Holly. The fact that white people are coming out and standing up for Black and brown people, and they're bringing law enforcement with them. I think that's important, that they bring those who are sworn to protect us to walk in solidarity with the citizens. I think it's important. And I've seen legislation, or at least resolutions, being introduced. I see there is movement, and I think people are getting used to the phrase defund the police, although a lot of us are educating what that means, because I'm not sure if it unrolled as the best term for what it means. But the fact that we're talking about police reform, I think, shows that we are moving forward, and I feel pretty good. But the hard work is after the demonstrations. It's not during. It's fine to stand there and chant and hold a sign, but it's after the demonstrations where you do stand up when you see racism. You have to call it out, and I think that's the most important as white people that we do, because it is our problem, not the problem of the brown people and Black people.
Right. So, Jamie, we've been around the horn. I'm not sure if our wandering water girls are ready for us. I guess they're not. I guess the most important thing for us to recognize is that even though we can't predict whether or not these changes are going to be durable, that we have to push for the greatest amount of correction to the system right now. When President Trump issues a statement about this problem and doesn't mention race, he's trying to push race under the carpet, and we can't allow that to happen. Although the police agencies need reform for many, many reasons, the fact is we're seeing right now in real time that African Americans and people of color are disproportionately affected, and they absolutely have to be protected. And Jamie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, it's 4:20, and we've been running the news around then, and we got everybody in. So let's listen to Rick's news, his cannabis news presentation right now, and then we will come back, resume this conversation. And Nikki, you just like we're gonna be speaking with Dr. Whitty, but please chime in on the conversation, as we go along, and then we'll focus on you when we're done there. But in the meantime, let's check out Rick with the news and absorb what's going on.
If everyone could mute their mics, that would be great. You need to optimize video, Jamie.
Yeah. We started over then. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second here.
I'm taking the blame for it. It's okay.
I like it that way.
Here we go.
Hi, I'm Rick Thompson, and this is the Cannabis News. Let's get started. Which Michigan lawmaker said, "I continue to be opposed to the promulgation of marijuana and its usage in our society at large, and will remain in opposition to any expansion of its adoption"? Well, that guy's not in touch with the mayor. Keep listening. I'll drop his name later in the news broadcast. But the new Michigan cannabis industry rules are ready to take effect on June 22nd, but they'll launch without 2 contentious provisions. The labor peace agreement clause has been removed. It would have forced business owners to sign an agreement with labor unions to not obstruct employees who chose to unionize. The mandatory nature of the law was a deal breaker for a lot of Michigan's MMFLA and adult use business owners. Also out on the new regulations, requiring cannabis cultivators to sell to any licensed processor or provisioning center. Now that was designed to make the industry more fair and give access to the entire production of the market to independent retailers. But vertically integrated producers and sellers want to keep the product of their multiple stacked cultivation licenses all to themselves. Big business wins, little guys lose once again. How about smoking high-potency marijuana concentrates? It boosts the blood levels of THC more than twice as much as smoking conventional cannabis, but it doesn't necessarily get you any higher, according to a new study of regular users published by University of Colorado Boulder researchers. That's interesting stuff. Gus Burns, good guy. Gus Burns from MLive reports that Michigan added at least 32 drug recognition experts in just 2 months from January until the beginning of March. This comes as state police are expanding their pilot program designed to catch cannabis users and others who drive their cars. There were 125 drug recognition experts in Michigan as of January. Now there are 157, including 37 Michigan State troopers, 36 deputies, 78 locals, 4 university officers, 1 tribal officer, and 1 motor carrier officer. This is the second wave of roadside testing experiments done by the Michigan State Police. In the first 100 tests, 74 roadside saliva tests indicated the presence of THC, but 11 of those people had blood tests, which said the roadside machine was wrong. Gus Burns reminds us that the results cannot on their own be used as evidence in determining if a driver was impaired. Bloomberg Tax just broke down all the adult use cannabis states and their tax structures. Did you know Maine passed adult use cannabis laws in 2016 and still doesn't have a regulated market for sales yet? Vermont did the same in 2018, still no retail sales. Same with New Hampshire. In 2014, the District of Columbia passed their legalization program, but they're covered by federal law. So sales and cultivation of cannabis, not gonna happen. In states where they do allow sales of cannabis to adults, there are some pretty bizarre tax structures. Illinois charges a 7% excise tax plus a THC tax. 10% tax on products with less than 35% THC, 25% on flower with greater than 35% THC content. There's a 20% tax on infused products too. California charges a tax on leaves when they're sold. Alaska has a tax specifically on clones and a tax on trim. Maine even imposed a 30-cent per seed tax for their upcoming retail market. Wow, that's just gouging. Several sources cite Michigan as having the lowest tax structure of any state with an adult use market. You are very welcome. Let's talk about some events, huh? Have you ever wanted to smoke a joint with Marijuana Regulatory Agency Director Andrew Brisboe? Yeah, you know, just hang loose, burn a bad bone with a big guy, chill out with a cannabis chieftain, you know, pick his brain a little and, you know, share with him some of your personal knowledge. Yeah. Well, you can't. Stop thinking about it. But what you can do is you can participate in something called a buzz session, a special conversation with Director Andrew Brisboe. Now that's on June 19th from 11 in the morning until noon. That's a Facebook broadcast you can participate in. Also on June 19, a drum circle at the Psychedelic Healing Shack on Woodward Avenue in Detroit. That starts at 8 p.m. That is a very famous location. A couple of things happening on Sunday, June 14th, tomorrow. An online grow seminar with legendary cannabis breeder DJ Short takes place on both Facebook and Twitch. Now that's sponsored in part by Ohm of Medicine and Grow Green MI. The proceeds from this event will go to a cool charity called the Prison Creative Arts Project. Now that program sparks up at an appropriate time, 4:20 p.m. Also tomorrow, June 14th, is a Zoom session titled Pandemic Health, Democracy, and Defeating All Bigots. Wake up! Hosted by Dr. Detroit himself, Professor Mike Whitty. This event begins at 7 p.m. On July 18, the great folks at Northeast Michigan Normal are once again doing their highway cleanup. They'll be focused on US 23 near Tawas. Free t-shirts for the attendees, courtesy of the Botanical Company. Nice. The National Cannabis Industry Association is hosting a Cannabis Caucus Cyber Style on June 17. It's a 45-minute meeting. There's some social time before and after. You must register in advance. How about a social distancing and storytelling event in Ann Arbor? Sounds good. Sponsored by the Michigan Psychedelic Society? Even better. June 20, Argo Park. Contact Colin MacDougall for more information. He didn't ask me to do that, but I'm sure he's going to get swamped. June 25 is the next quarterly review session for the Michigan Marijuana Regulatory Agency. It'll be held online via Zoom. Some handy info was posted by the Michigan Cannabis Defender Law Office, love those guys, and that can be viewed on the Facebook page titled Seeking 420 Events. If you're really looking for that up close and personal cannabis event experience again, you'll find them in Michigan in July. On Oil Day, July 10, Buddy Dalton and his Clio Cultivation fire up that annual weekend bash he does. The outdoor jam features a medical tent for registered patients and music by, perhaps appropriately, Grateful Dead cover bands. On July 11th in Traverse City, a bunch of attorneys are sponsoring the 420 Cannabis and Hemp Expo. Tickets are still on sale via Ticket Tailor. Takes place at the Soaring Eagle Casino and begins at 9 a.m. Tickets are $69 for the one-day gig. All of the events I mentioned above can be found listed for free at the Seeking 420 Events page here on Facebook. As for podcasts, there's no end to them. Start off your Monday with Medical Mondays. That's each and every Monday at 9 p.m. on both YouTube and Facebook Live. Every other Tuesday, you can catch Benzinga's Cannabis Hour broadcast at 2 p.m. Now, the next broadcast starts at June 25th. On every Tuesday, you can catch Jazz Cabbage Cafe with myself and Jamie Lowell and the crew at 4 p.m., broadcasting live on Facebook. Jazz Cabbage is Michigan's most unpredictable cannabis podcast. Thursdays include Planet Green Trees at 8 p.m. on Facebook, and Friday, catch Darren McCarty on 760 a.m. WJR at 7 p.m. on the Real Radio. He talks hockey and cannabis during his 1-hour live broadcast. Cannabis Connection does some weekly broadcast stuff too, so check out their website as well. Finally, which lawmaker said that crazy phrase, "I continue to be opposed to the promulgation of marijuana and its usage in our state and in our society at large"? This far out-of-touch lawmaker is Senator Ed McBroom, who represents most of the Upper Peninsula. Yep, the leaping deer has a tick and it needs to be removed. Clean up on aisle McBroom, please. And that's the cannabis news for July 13th, for June 13th, 2020. I'm Rick Thompson. Catch me on Jazz Cabbage Cafe on Tuesdays or read my columns monthly in the Rolling Paper magazine. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
You're welcome, Rick.
I'd like to say thank you to Nikki for laughing at all of my jokes. I watched you and you actually got them all. I was worried about that. Sometimes, you know, Jamie is a really poor barometer because he doesn't give me any love. He doesn't laugh at any of my shit. Makes me feel bad every time. So I can't.
Hey, I laugh in here.
Oh,
it counts.
Very helpful. Very helpful. Thanks. Thanks for that expression of love. So
I was cracking up.
Gotcha, Nick.
Hey, a lot of good stuff in there. Yeah.
I worked Colin in there. Yeah.
A lot of good connected stuff. We have, of course, the Julie and Shelly out there with Jim and Colin on here, and you mentioned the June 20th event. We have Dr. Detroit with us. You mentioned the events that he has done and that kind of stuff. So it all worked out pretty well. It was good stuff there. It's been working out well to replay that on our show here.
Well, and although there might be a couple of audio glitches, that worked out pretty well. In past meetings, sometimes it hasn't. So thank you, Derek. Good job. Appreciate it.
It works out better when Derek does it. There's no question about that. So.
Well, I've heard several people say that about different things, so I'm not sure.
So we actually have another video we'll get to here in a couple minutes, and that's of Dr. Detroit when he was participating in our digital hash bash, which I think likely will turn out to be the hash bash of this year. Maybe things get going and something materializes, but I haven't seen any evidence of that yet, and it's kind of a difficult thing to do at the moment. So we might be looking at the Jubilee next year, for next time around, for the gathering at the Diag. But we've been trying to highlight whenever we have guests on who have been on there, and Rick did a good job of going through and making these different segments of everybody's presentation. And during that time, there was a little bit of a glitch with the I think it was with the video, but we got his statement out there, and it's really good. So we definitely want to play that and have that on hand to discuss, perhaps too, with the other list of stuff that he'd like to bring to the table.
Once again, one of our male guests for the digital hash bash had to have their audio rescued by the female partner of theirs. So.
That was a common theme. Yep. Yep.
Happened several times.
And Deborah made sure she pointed it out every time. and
I
still-
pointed out several times. Every time it happened, I pointed it out. Everybody had a smart woman hanging over their neck trying to fix their audio and video feed.
Yep.
There you go.
So I don't know if we got that queued up, Derek, but if not, in the meantime, we can,
Yeah. Do it.
you know, we can pump up the. There we go. Let's go right to this.
Yeah, I'm just gonna click it. All right, here.
Shut up and
Nice.
All right, very excited to have our next speaker. He is a professor at University of Detroit Mercy. In his professional capacity, he's also known around town as Dr. Detroit. He's one of the profound advocates in the state of Michigan, and he's a great organizer. And all the good things I've said about him are probably because of his fantastic wife as well, who helped get him hooked up here. But Gail Whitty. But please, for our Hash Bash community, we welcome Dr. Detroit, Michael Whitty.
Hey, the blues is all right. I love Thornetta. I'm a member of the Detroit Blues Society. That's why I call myself Dr. Detroit. That's what makes it a beautiful and holy city. So let's keep the blues alive. I'm delighted to be here today. I can assure you that I am very relaxed and enjoying the moment with all of you together. We're all in this marriage with sacred herb. It's the spirit of the plant that gives our great life the gifts that we enjoy as prophets, building our own legacy with cannabis in a future where we will say to each other, not just namaste, but canistay. I tell you, stay positive, hopeful, optimistic, and brave, and we'll pass through the virus and we'll pass through the hostility to the beautiful, heart-opening medicine that gives us a peaceful heart, allows us to accept ourselves and love life. So my message today, as your Dr. Detroit, is let's accept the job we've taken on. Let's appreciate our lives, the nature spirit. Let's always give thanks and gratitude for the joys of our life that cannabis has brought us. Count the blessings of cannabis, to see the silver lining in everything, and absolutely give thanks. Find your voice to be a prophet in your own time. Finish your life legacy with trust, love, and happiness and an open heart, allowing the sacred herb to make you more sweet, holy, and loving. That's your natural self, folks, to be sweet, holy, and loving. And the next time I shake your hand, I want you to look me in the eye and say, the Holy Trinity is in us all. We are the futurists. We are the ones that will cure this world and this reality with cannabis, because that's part of nature's medicine. It relaxes us. It makes us more adaptable, more accepting, more open-hearted, more calm and kind, more emotional intelligence that leads us psychologically to open us to an innate spirituality, which I'll call our insight, our inner guide, our intuition. It just makes us do better decisions. It acts as our guide. It allows us to connect with others like today. It connects us with healing, hope, happiness. Like John Sinclair says, it's all good. And I say, John, it ain't fair, John Sinclair, but we're going to make a fair future in a fair world with cannabis consciousness. And that's what it really is. The original dream was that it alters us to a higher consciousness so we can live more selflessly, more kindly, more lovingly, more in service, more understanding that we're all one, we're all family.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll say, this was this was dedicated, the Digital Hash Bash, to John Sinclair, and he was in the waiting room. He didn't get on and do a presentation. He was recovering from pretty major surgery, but he was there with us and listening. And I did ask him if he wanted to come on for a minute, and what he told me was, no, I just completely agree with Dr. Whitty. So he just said, that's what I want to say, is what he just said.
I will say that on the digital hash bash, this was the presentation where the word love and happiness and positivity was the most evident. Your speech was very impressive and very motivational, Mike. Thank you.
Yep. And so we're turning it over to you in a minute, Dr. Detroit. I just want to say that you are a professor, academician. You've labor relations at University of Detroit, classes at University of Michigan, University of San Francisco, even at Oaksterdam, of course. And you've brought some of us into your class to discuss some of these drug war related issues and that type of thing. And just been doing this reform efforts in many regards for many years and been really successful with it. And glad you're still around. And I know you have some important stuff to offer to us now. And I'd like to turn it over to you to start this conversation.
Very much, Jamie and Rick and Deborah. I'm with you. I'm with you 100% there on that gut instinct about cops. I have a cop brother and a cop sister-in-law, Detroit cops, retired. And they taught me about alley court. They taught me about test a line. They taught me a lot of things. And I don't like driving up from the safety of 7 Mile and Woodward into Oakland County, where I have to cross and face 5 police departments and the sheriff and the prosecutor. So it ain't fair, but that's how it has been most of my life. That's why I joined and helped found the Michigan Cannabis Caucus, and I encourage my friends like Craig Schmidt up in Saginaw to create a GOP version of it, so honest Republicans convert their own party. Everybody work with their comfort zone and where they live, but we have a big election coming, an important primary in Oakland County. A progressive judge stepped down to challenge the incumbent prosecutor, Jessica Cooper. It looks like she can be taken out of office on this round, as the progressives are engaged as a focus in the primary around the Oakland County prosecutor's race. I'm involved with helping Rashida Tlaib in her primary race in August also. So listeners should check on who's running in either party's primary and try to get the most open-minded person elected in the primary. Then, stay connected up through the coming election cycle with the Cannabis Caucus. Is going to be revitalized on a district level. So all of the hosts of the show could represent their congressional district. That's how the Democratic Party's caucus system is set up. And we have also, some news about Senator Peters being a co-sponsor of the banking bill, the cannabis banking bill that's in the Senate. And an interesting piece of mail sent out by Safer Mish today on former Attorney General Holder in a position to influence Biden to cough up legalization before November, so we can be better bridge builders and lesser of two evil voting for the hardcore audience that may be tuned in to this podcast. But all of that and local races to take back the Michigan House, so we have some better leverage to push expungement quicker. At least in one chamber, we have, had Isaac Robinson there. I grew up with Isaac, and I know his father as well. And I feel sorrowful for his loss in our legislature. We have Jeff Irwin in the Senate doing a lot of good. We should be making the most of Black Lives Matter. No question, there's a crossover. I always gave the Prop 1 message as end the racist drug war. And I used the book by Michelle Alexander, Jim Salame, in my drug policy class at U of M Dearborn. So there's a natural overlay. We could broaden our coalitions. We could do more cross networking. We could make elections more fun and more exciting. We could even knock off the sheriff in November if we had a big blue wave. That's why I say, don't just get an absentee ballot, but tell people, make it emphatic. Let's vote straight Democratic. So we teach the Republican Party a lesson, and we break up their alliance of bankers and bigots that have captured the party, a religious party of national Christians or nationalist Christians. It's a really horrible world trend, and we are part of it. We're just one step ahead of the Philippines. So I'm pretty energized by this whole process. The only thing I'd add is that I just spent an hour with the new chair of the Michigan Democratic Party's Cannabis Caucus. It's certainly a vehicle for us to get a better seat at the table, to get the governor to initiate an expungement pardon, have the governor initiate an expungement pardon seems really good. And, I obviously would love to come back in future cycles through the election. Just because everything breaks fast every day, there's great chance that we can get further by the fact that we have friends in every movement. We have people who medicate for different reasons in every walk of life, in every age group, in every race, in every movement. So we could become a leading force and a healing force. And I really think, Rick and Jamie, you've got your finger on the pulse. I'm very impressed. And Debra, it's terrific. We are really a progressive bunch. And I think the cannabis is somehow part of what brought us all together.
Typically not Colin or Jim. Just want to point.
I was going to say Colin for sure not. He's still a pup. He's still in training.
And Jim is so cool. Look at his background.
Jim,
look at his whole.
Is his hair blowing?
Wow, that's Fonzie. That's Fonzie goes to camp right there, man. But Michael Whitty, we've got an issue right now with a gentleman named Michael Thompson, who's been incarcerated for a very long time under a very old rule, and it seems like we're having no luck shaking the tree and getting him to fall out of the system. What's the best way for Michael Thompson advocates to go about forcing the governor to release him from the system?
There's a large prison reform coalition called Liberation. They've been out challenging Jessica Cooper with black women who've had trouble with the sheriff, the lawsuits, jailings, shootings. And they're doing bail, they're doing the people that are integrated back into the community, moms with kids in prison and women in prison. They're doing a number of ancillary reform projects with a statewide focus on Lansing. Maybe that's a doorway for us to get our message. Here's a case where you can enlarge the coalition that they're claiming to represent, but we don't have a seat at the table, and vice versa. It broadens our scope. But what I've heard today from almost every single person in this chat, you already are very broad and encompassing thinkers, and I'm honored to be among you. And Colin, this is the best college class you'll ever have. This is a super group of gurus here for you.
I'm their guru. What are you talking
He was going to say, no, you are not. You told us right at Taco Tuesday. I am not your guru.
Very old inside joke about Colin being the guru. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And he is. He's the guru.
It all works out pretty well.
We're all each other's guru is like what really needs to be.
That's true.
Okay.
It's like a group guru action. Which,
it's guru, man.
I think that's
Rick makes that sound kind of gross and undesirable. For some
yes, he does. Oh, everything. Yeah, just a little moist.
So, Mike, you just did a Zoom meeting. You might have heard on the news program that I kind of plugged you for it. Can you tell us a little bit about what you just did, what it accomplished, and who you had participating?
Well, the group was the Humanist Committee of the Unitarian Church. They were older people. So I started with the appeal to my generation. We grew up with Archie Bunker as comedy, and most of half of my generation are still Archie Bunker mindset, pro-Trump people. So we were looking at maybe the pandemic could be a fulcrum to show that Trump betrayed them and risked their lives and put them into a high risk 6 months to come or a year to come, where they have to keep dodging the bullet every time they choose to go outside, go anywhere, have anyone over or in, let alone let someone pass a joint to them and put their lips upon the joint. That's also considered a transmissible possibility due to saliva. So that's changed the habits of my lifetime. And I even caught myself forgetting that in one case and instinctively clutching a joint that was passed toward me. So I realized, whoa, I'm taking my life in my hands. I might as well be riding a motorcycle on I-75. So I'm
muscle memory, though, Mike. Someone sticks a joint out to you, you just automatically, it's hard to break that habit. I give it to you.
I confess, Father. Forgive me for my sins.
Yeah. Well, so what's your plan for 2020? Are you still going to look forward to having classes later this year? I know as an educator, everything's sort of up in the air right now, isn't it?
Yes, it's still not yet clear whether the college will reopen and take a risk. They could have a lot of sick kids in the dorm, or they might stay heavily digital. It looks like many of the colleges are going to try to reopen. Still a little bit up in the air. But I've been honored to have various guests from the cannabis movement over the years, and Adam Brooke among them, have been in that class. It's a good experience for the Muslim American students. For many of them, it's something they've never encountered or thought about. Colin, you were in that panel.
With Q?
About that class at U of M Dearborn you came to.
Yeah.
With Zara.
Zara and Q?
Yeah, and Q.
Right?
Yeah.
There was somebody else too.
A woman who was a grower or had some products and was in the industry.
Yeah.
River,
I can't think of her name. But yeah, it was really cool. It was really fun class. I got to talk about decriminalized nature in it, and all the kids' like eyes went like big and wide, and I talked to them about like what I had done like in the past, and I don't know, I thought that they were really listening to me when I spoke, and also when Zara and Quinette spoke, and I'd say like there was like a lot of the class was I'd say half Muslim at least ethnicity at the U of M Dearborn. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Pretty open-minded young people who are abstinent and don't engage in the medicine. And then they reminded me, when I tried to compare it to alcohol, they reminded me that Islam forbids the consumption of alcohol. So they were not engaged in things that I assume college students might engage in. Like beer drinking.
That's a knowledge gap you just wouldn't normally.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I didn't bring it in the door. I learned it from the students. Yeah.
Well, I spoke to your class. Greg Pawlowski and I came at one point. I'm not sure if Jamie's spoken to your class at U of M Dearborn before.
Once at University of Detroit and once at University or Michigan Dearborn.
Yep. So it's a great experience to be able to bring the little bit of time that we have to be able to cram as much knowledge as we can for the students. But you know, what a great opportunity they have. Typically, we don't think of classes like what you're offering as being available in higher education. And I think it's a wonderful attribute. We see Professor Gus Rosani at the University of Michigan offering specific classes for cannabis, things like Northern Michigan University. And I think Lake Superior State or Lake Tech now have cannabis classes here in Michigan also too. It's quite revolutionary. The halls of education used to freeze out any details about cannabis. Professors were forbidden from even mentioning it. Mike, is that true?
Well, I was careful how I raised it. In the early days in the labor classes, I used to do a module on employee drug testing. So I interject the civil liberties and the union contract and the steward and some labor law. So I did bring the subject up. I managed to find a way through the course title to attach the use of cannabis, like employee drug testing, truckers and drivers and folks like that under federal law mandated. Yes, we can raise it, but it puts you in it stereotype you. I will say one change that impressed me when I was at U of M Dearborn. Down the hall, the business school had a Green Wolverine business student cannabis club. And I thought, wow, well, okay, the business schools have a cannabis club. There's a whole new class of young business people. Of course, you guys have covered the younger generation of entrepreneurs who have mixed in with the old timers, but there's a good group of interesting people, not all of whom are our cup of tea 100%, but they're our cousins, aren't they? They're part of the family.
Well, the Green Wolverine's been a great series. I've spoken at their events a couple times by invitation. But you are right. That really is a melding of some of us from the activist community versus some people who actually are hardcore business professionals who really may not share a lot of other interests in common with us. Jamie, you were going to say something a second ago.
One of those guys from the Green Wolverine is now, I believe, running a kind of a successful hemp operation.
Enrique. I mean, there's just lots of great guys down there. I suppose the important thing is when you look at a university like the University of Michigan, it has to be a leader. I learned just last year an interesting statistic. When all aspects of the university are considered, the University of Michigan is the largest single employer in the state of Michigan. Now that includes U of M Hospital, U of M Michigan, Dearborn, the Flint campus, all the other campuses that they have. When you look at that aggregated, that's an incredible amount of power. And for that university to be advancing cannabis in some ways, and not necessarily so much in the other. And there's a study that just came out from the University of Michigan, which is done in partnership with the Michigan drug enforcement people, it's kind of stilted, and I'm a little upset about it. But you know, the university's taken a pretty good stance on most things here.
It reminds me of an analogy that was commonly raised in the Bay Area. Dennis Perone being one of the leaders, who, along with Dale Geringer and a host of other people in the early medical marijuana 215, was sort of a recognition that we're normalizing marijuana by coming out and being responsible users, and we're shaping it around good cultural values and optimism and positive and virtuous intention. So it's sort of analogous to the fact that the culture in our lifetime has eased up on being frightened of gay people or frightened of homosexuality. We're a little more relaxed, and we got it in the proper context. It's more comfortable for most of us. So that's an evolution we've seen occur around something that was taboo and stigmatized. And so too, cannabis still has a stigma associated with it. It still has a lot of judgment, and we're lesser people for using it. If we just drank vodka, we'd be normal. That would be fine. But we deal with this mysterious weed. It might be the devil's weed that we use, you know. God knows, it could be immoral.
Well, we always see the people have advancements in philosophy and social acceptance, and that leads lawmaking. Lawmaking oftentimes takes a while to catch up. That's why sometimes we're outraged when we see laws on the books that date back to the 50s or the 40s or the 30s for things that are just absolutely forbidden in our current society. So what do we need to do in order for cannabis to push forward and get some of those old rules taken off the books? For example, the Schedule I status in Michigan of cannabis. This is one of Jamie's favorite topics to talk about because it's such a huge contradiction. It makes people just trust government just because they embrace it.
You know, that's true. And I would hope that Biden has said one of the things he would consider is taking descheduling it, I believe. So possibly we can achieve that sooner at the federal level, and the states can fall in line, or we can ask more of our governor and attorney general and elected officials, and elect a few more of our own people, like Al Williams, for that House seat down in Detroit that he has a primary fight. And so keep your eye on the primaries and get yourself a ballot, take a look at who's running for what, and know that you can have more influence in a primary than any other typical general election. You could work in a Republican Party. If there's some listener who's dyed in the wool Republican, and we know we have lots of pot-smoking Republican friends, so some of our best pot-smoking friends are Republicans, but I wouldn't want my daughter to marry one. No, I'm just but yeah. So,
we were all thinking it, but you just said it. No, just kidding. Jamie.
So we had Al on last week, and just to let you know, and of course, in a couple minutes here, we're going to be speaking with Nikki. And if you're welcome to stay on too for that, Mike, by the way, for that discussion, and you know that might be of some interest for you. So please do if that's the case. But before we kind of move on to that, and you let us know what we can, how we can help out, whatever your the things that you think are important right now. How substantial or how serious it is, and to what degree do you think Biden will discuss the descheduling? Will he say, I'm going to order, you know, the DEA to take this off Schedule 1 day one, like Bernie was saying, or what's kind of the plan most likely from, you know, when that goes down?
So I think I would go and ask the Drug Policy Alliance people or the MPP or half dozen groups that are working right in Washington, and maybe a key congressperson. I could go through Andy Levin for some help, but some of the co-chairs of the National House Cannabis Caucus, they would have a better sense of how we can get the most from our time and effort. And I wish we had a better grip on that at the level most of us are operating. But I think that's the key piece. Could somebody else help? Going through the Bernie people, they're in the mix. A couple of the key Bernie people on Biden's committees might be a doorway to sharpen and raise issues that would be important to us, like a clear-cut position on descheduling would take a lot of voters off the fence who might have no love for the Democrats and be inclined to kind of disturb things with Trump and vote for him. So maybe a clear signal from the Democratic Party would help their youth turnout, would help the single-issue voter, the Republican on the fence, a contrarian Archie Bunker voter might tip for us if Biden was better and more visible. He made the cannabis issues that he's already come around pretty good on, considering where his starting point was, pretty bad. But they should see this as more value and not be arrogant and insulated. That killed Hillary's one slight chance of making it. Insulation and arrogance. You got those big top campaigns are too isolated from people like us. We don't have our message to them, or we don't have a seat anywhere near them. Well, I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
So anything, and I appreciate that. Anything to leave us with as we transition into our next discussion?
Just quickly, do as much, big tent, mega coalition building, look for new allies, reach out, make a little effort to these prison reform people and criminal justice reform people, because it lets us in the door on a lot of fronts and a lot of levels. And we're mixed in with allies who will buy our expungement priorities and buy a good portion of what we're up to. I'm glad to be on. Thanks for inviting me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Dr. Detroit.
And welcome to stick around.
Yep, and thanks not just for today's performance, but for everything you've done for a long time.
Thanks, Michael.
We have a reggae band performing at Dr. Bob's at 8 o'clock this Friday for the summer solstice outdoors, with plenty of room for distancing. And, look for me there.
Or we could walk over to Jamie Lowell's compound afterwards.
All true, except for I will be in Kalkaska.
Oh, well, we can still walk over.
You can walk over still, yeah.
Yeah.
Visit the dogs, perhaps. Yes.
We can jump the fence.
That's the real reason we go over there.
Are you down, Colin? We can scale the fence and have a bonfire in Jamie's backyard.
But you can be let in. I'm just not going to be here.
Okay.
On Saturday, I have a psychedelic society meeting in Ann Arbor at that same time, I think. Right?
20th, exactly. Friday is the 19th and Saturday is 20th. And we will talk about that later, but let's transition into our discussion with Nikki. I'm glad, and Nikki, I'm glad that this is Nicole Braeden running for House State Representative seat for the 43rd District. I'm glad that you were hanging out with us up until now to hear kind of information we typically have on the show. It is kind of cannabis based, although I know that you're campaigning on behalf of many more issues than that. I know that you generally are in support of rights when it comes to cannabis and that type of thing. So you can expound on that as much as you'd like to. But I just want to point out before I turn it over to you that you did campaign in the last cycle and didn't win, but you got kind of initiated into this process. And there was a lot of people. It seems like a lot of success with a lot of women, running in races to offer a change in direction that people were desperately needing, especially after the 2016 election. And now you're running this time around, and everything seems really elevated now, and the need for that type of change, and many people kind of disgruntled in the Trump world. Of course, there's the base that sticks no matter what, but some of the fence people just going, this is getting too ridiculous. We need change in direction. And you're making the rounds really well. There's a really impressive list of endorsements that are going on. It just looks really good. So I hope you can let us know how you're feeling about that and what it looks like now, given this new world in an area that would be normally really difficult for you to probably fare well. But please introduce yourself to us and let us know what you're campaigning on.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Jamie, you touched on that I did run in 2018. The Michigan House Caucus made a concerted effort to make sure they had a Democrat in every seat in all 110 district house, every house district. There's 110. And I was a last minute recruit. This was never on my to-do list in life. I did get involved in politics after the 2016 election when I realized that voting was not enough. I've always voted progressively. I've always had progressive ideas about how our lives should be. And I led and created an indivisible group up in North Oakland County. And our main objective was to get Mike Bishop out of office. We succeeded. We now have Alyssa Slotkin. And then so spring of 2018, before she was elected, I was called and they said, we need somebody to run in the 43rd seat. My husband actually was the final nudge for me to agree to it because I had no idea what it would be like to run a campaign. I had been a volunteer on both Alyssa Slotkin's campaign and my now state senator Rosemary Bear's campaign. So I had like a touch of what was like to be involved in a campaign, let alone run my own. But we got to work. We started knocking doors. We knocked on 7,600 doors in just a few months, and that was quite an impact. We got the attention of Michigan Republicans. They turned around and spent $250,000 to take me down. And so we definitely made it onto the map. I say we because we are a campaign. It's not me. It's us. It's us because I couldn't do this alone. And before the election was over, I did decide to run again just because I felt like I didn't have much of a chance to get ready for the 2018 campaign. It's been a long journey. I'm feeling the fatigue of being a candidate for nearly, it's going on 3 years now. And it is tiring, it's exhausting, but I know the ropes a little better this time. It's been in this pandemic has certainly thrown a giant wrench in any kind of campaign plan anyone might have, because to be successful and win, you need lots of money and you have to knock on a lot of doors. And this pandemic has kind of diluted both of those, and in fact, it eliminated the ability to knock on doors. And that's where I really shined. I knocked on lots of doors leading up to the pandemic. In fact, we got to work the weekend before the first case arrived in Michigan, and we knocked on 940 doors in one weekend. And we were hoping to keep up with that momentum. But of course, you know, the day of our presidential primary, our first case showed up. Actually, I think it was 2 cases showed up in Oakland County, and therefore everything spiraled downward from there. I had to cancel 5 fundraisers. So there's the money that, you know, is needed to run a campaign. The caucus really jockeys you against other candidates. They not so much judge, but they definitely rank us. And so my race is considered a tier 2. The tier 1 races are the 38th district in Novi, the 39th in the Commerce West Bloomfield area, the 45th in the Rochester Hills area. I'm just looking at Oakland County races. Those are the ones I'm familiar with. I know there's some, the 104th up in Traverse City. Those are more tier 1. But the fact that I'm a tier, I'm pretty proud of that. And Jamie was right. In 2018, we advanced Democratic turnout by, well, not turnout, but voters by 8.5%. So we went from 35% Democrat votes to 43.5%. So this time around, it's definitely within reach with some hard work. Our president is making it a little bit easier for us. Michigan Republicans have certainly made it easier for us. Their response to the governor's executive orders and her shutdown orders. I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding. Michigan is doing extremely well when it comes to cases and deaths. And I think she deserves a round of applause for her leadership and making those hard decisions that we're all safer for it. Whether Republicans want to be disgruntled about it, go for it. She's a strong woman, she can handle it. But I think I feel safer today because of her direction. So some of the endorsements I have received, some of the ones you might be more familiar with are, I did receive the endorsement of the Young Democrats of Michigan. And I just received the endorsement of the Progressive Caucus of the Michigan Democrat Party. I've not announced that one yet, so I'm getting ready to announce that one. And then I've received many endorsements from labor unions already, which is really important as a Democrat. We need labor support. to be elected. We need their money. We need their manpower. We need their support. They need to send out our names to their memberships because Oakland County has a lot of union members that live there. In my district is made up of Waterford Township, Independence Township, and Clarkston. So it's northern/central Oakland County, and it has been a Republican stronghold for over 40 years. So it would be an historical flip if I managed to make it across the finish line as victorious. And what else? Oh, there is some movement when it comes to cannabis. I've actually kept my eye out for a different movement in my area of the woods. It is not legal. There are no dispensaries in my district anywhere. But I did sit through a couple municipal meetings, like the city of Clarkston, the village of the city. Is it the city of the village of Clarkston or whatever? It's downtown Clarkston. It's
a village, yeah.
Right, but it's also a city. It's like the village of the city. It's a city of the village Clarkston. It's this bizarre.
What part is downtown? Right.
It isn't. There's like 950 people that live there. So there was a business called Pleasant Trees that came and gave their proposal of opening a medicinal dispensary in downtown, and I thought they did a great job. They described it as a boutique dispensary, and I think they did a great job. And the response in town that I saw was mixed. It was like 50-50. And what I thought was the most compelling moment was when someone had stood up and said, remember when somebody wanted to open a bar in a church and everyone went crazy, and now that is a Union Joint, which is one of the most successful Michigan-based restaurant chains in the state. So I think change is tough. Change is hard for some people, but I think just talking about it in that community, I think was really important. And then Waterford, there's been even more gains. I sat through a board of trustees meeting, and they were offering open like public comment, and 15 different people stood up, and 14 out of 15 were in support. The state overwhelmingly voted for it, so it makes sense that a community like Waterford would want it. And it's not only just for the medicine, but it's for the revenue. Revenue sharing is down so much in Michigan over the last 2 decades. Our communities like Waterford are hurting because of the lack of revenue sharing. They don't have a downtown area, they are a township. So they rely on revenue sharing for their communities. And I think Waterford would be a prime place. And they just had another a Zoom trustee meeting recently, and it looks like they've made even more segue. So it is moving up here, and I've been in touch with those who are invested in opening dispensaries in the area. And I'm a lay person when it comes to this whole industry, so forgive me if I'm not using the right language. Zara, you guys have talked about Zara. I know she's the vice chair of the Cannabis Caucus. She's a volunteer on my campaign. So I'm getting support from the movement. And also in 2018, Michigan Liberation did knock doors for me. Organizations cannot coordinate with a candidate. So I didn't know until after the fact. And I was very honored that they picked my campaign as somebody that they felt stood up for, some of the problems with our criminal justice system. I'm supportive of reform. You're talking about expungement. I think we definitely need to get people out of prison that are serving time for these crimes that really are not, they don't compare to the time that they're serving. There are women that are serving in Huron Valley for drug charges that shouldn't be there. I think having some stronger criminal justice candidates or electeds in the state house would make a huge difference because our prison system is so expensive. We spend so much money on keeping people behind bars when they could be reformed. They could be out making money, paying their taxes, and living their lives. Yeah, you guys have an ally in me. If elected, please you stay in touch with me and let me know how I can help. Let me see. I was taking down notes. That's about it.
How can people reach your campaign? How could they donate? How could they volunteer?
Yes, I have a website. It's Vote Nicole Braeden, and right there is my name. Nope, So just add vote in front of it and .com. You can Google me. My website comes right up. And you can there's forms to volunteer. There's definitely a form to donate, and donations are very, very welcomed. Right now, it's more challenging to make the calls to ask for money because you don't know how people are feeling economically. Everything is so uncertain for the future, and to donate to a campaign is it's hard to ask. And so if anyone is able, it's very welcomed. Thank you for the plug.
Absolutely. So, you don't mind hanging out and discussing some stuff for a minute or two? So it's been talked about a couple times in a couple different ways here, the concept of descheduling cannabis. It was talked about on a federal level, but we have a controlled substances list in Michigan, and cannabis exists on it still as a Schedule I drug, with the concept that it has no medicinal value, that it's very addictive, dangerous, all this kind of stuff. Meanwhile, we've not only made it legal medically many years ago, and then made a commercial system. It is completely legal now. And during the course of the commercial system emerging, the state allowed caregivers to contribute to inventory in order to keep things moving before cultivation centers could get up and running, and without a lot of parameters. And caregivers, fortunately, because it did keep things going and they produced really good cannabis, would put their harvest in their car or vehicle and drive it to the appropriate place and bring it into the system. That ends for flower September 30th, I believe, actually. But the point is, that's not how we treat a controlled substance, and especially not in not a Schedule I. And that is associated with a lot of penalties and things. For example, we talked about earlier the pilot program of the 5-county roadside swab test has now been expanded to statewide, and a lot of lawmakers voted against it, which I'm happy about, because it doesn't really seem to make sense. It doesn't really seem to be very, scientific. But cannabis is included in all of that, and it's included in all that because it's connected to controlled substances, and it's just inappropriate and creates other, potential harms for people. So there is a couple things going on. One is there's a lawsuit, which is running into a couple of issues, and it's based on before the MRTMA came into existence, and based mainly on the just MMMA and the change in laws that way, suing the Board of Pharmacy, which is an organization that could deschedule cannabis or take it off or move it, and with a group of defendants, and that's in the Court of Claims or the Court of Appeals at the moment. And I think that's going to discuss a little bit more on planting green trees too, and then it can be done legislatively too. And I have had a discussion with a couple lawmakers, most recently with the Representative Robbie, about introducing something that would take care of that. In other states, those types of conflicts in law are made harmonious just by a matter of course, but we don't do that here. So it maintains some issues for CPS issues and other things. It's connected to a bunch of serious penalties because it's on the controlled substances list, and we legalized it. It's not appropriate that it's there anymore. That's just something that should have been taken care of by now, in my opinion. But
just another reason for people to distrust government, because they embrace a lie.
Yeah. So anyway, that comes up hopefully when you're in session with everybody, that there might be more work to do. There may be subsequent legislation that has to fill in some of the gaps created by doing that, which is fine. But that needs to happen. So I hope that you're in support of that.
If Democrats take over the state house, unfortunately, we're going to have a lot of work to do. I mean, I know that there are pending issues. I know that repeal the right to work law is probably one of the first things that need to be done, and then bring back the prevailing wage. Those are issues that I am definitely fighting for. I think working people deserve more money. We know that it's evident that people don't make enough money when they're on unemployment, and they make more money on unemployment than they do with their wages. We know that something's wrong with our wage system, and we have to make sure people can pay for the basic necessities. But it's unfortunate that we have so many things to unravel that Republicans have done over the last decade. So I hope that there's enough time in the day to get all of these things amended. And I think it is absurd that cannabis is still a Scheduled I drug. It just doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. Especially if it's legal recreationally. How can that be? But I guess I am dumbfounded how that wasn't.
It's one of those remnants from a time long past.
Yeah, and I hope that this might not be the first, but definitely get used to illogic in the legislature.
Yeah.
Something we warn every potential activist who wants to go up there and give the information to the decision makers and overcome all the objections and everything. And the whole system doesn't work exactly as black and white as that. And so don't be too surprised when something doesn't make sense, but is anyway.
There's a lot of things that don't make any sense,
right.
But yet they're there. So the fact that women still in Michigan don't have the right to make decisions on their own bodies. We have an old law on the books that still exists that we can't make our own decisions about reproductive futures about, and so that definitely can fit in that category of things that don't make any sense.
When Rick Snyder first came into office, he made a really big deal about wiping out a bunch of old laws that didn't make any sense. And I remember that he proudly proclaimed that they had wiped out like a dozen laws governing the construction of outhouses. And his declaration that they had done all of this work for this really minuscule and unimportant issue just put in a broad focus all the huge glaring issues that he completely ignored as far as taking care of wiping out some of those old things.
Well, and then he did a good job of ushering in new laws on his way out. Like the one that just really is a thorn in my side is that Michigan can't have any environmental protections that are more strict than the federal government. There's something very wrong with that when we are, we're surrounded by the Great Lakes, and we should have a higher standards than states like Kansas, who don't have 20% of the world's fresh water surrounding it. It's just ridiculous. And that was signed into law right as he was on his way out the door during the lame duck session. And that, I know that would be another piece of legislation that would be, there was already a bill introduced to repeal that, but I just looked today and it's still sitting in committee from March of 2019. So we have a lot of work to do, and hopefully, I know that as Democrats, we can walk and chew gum, and if we have to go 5 days a week, I know that we will have to unravel a lot of mess because Michigan is, we hold the rankings in terrible, terrible things. We're like one of the best states for the lack of business taxes, and we're at the bottom for education and infrastructure and
legislative integrity is down in the hole, right?
Government transparency.
It's corrupted.
Yes.
I want to lay one more on you while we're kind of in this zone before we see what we're going to discuss next. But there is a group of bills that are include some expungement, and one of them centers in on cannabis, kind of a thing. And it does say that it will apply to the things that were made legal by the MRTMA. But in practice, it really does not, because it stops short of recognizing and being able to actually apply all the things that MRTMA now permits, which is for an adult can grow or produce or manufacture cannabis in their own home, can possess it, can travel around with it, can take it over to somebody else and can hand it over to them. But if the person did have a pass that included manufacturing, possession, and intent to delivery, that somehow doesn't qualify for expungement. I know Senator Irwin is working on that issue, and this package of bills is better than conditions that exist right now, and it might take a better composition of lawmakers to fix this, and we've discussed that on this show before too. So that's something to look out for, and it might be you in the next session being amidst the better composition of lawmakers fixing that stuff.
Fingers crossed. I think we're going to take a majority no matter what, whether I win or not. I think it's time. I think people are fed up. I don't think people cared for the response that Michigan Republicans had to the stay-at-home orders and the support of events like Operation Gridlock that blocked ambulances from getting to Sparrow Hospital. And there was proof of coronavirus spread back to northern and western communities after those events. So I think Democrats have a very, very good shot of taking the House. I hope I go with them, but if not, I think it's going to be done. And then next we turn our eyes towards the state Senate so we can have a trifecta finally in the state, because Republicans have led and had held leadership in the state for so long that, things like being last and transparency in government is nothing to brag about here in Michigan. So I think we have a very good shot, and definitely count me in on some of these reforms. And I rely on your expertise to explain some of these laws, because when I was going through the Progressive Caucus's endorsement questionnaire, there was a huge section on the medical marijuana laws in Michigan, and I was overwhelmed just trying to dig into it and just to answer the questions. So I have a lot to learn, and I'm happy that I know you guys to help put it in some easier terms, because as lawmakers, I'm not a lawmaker, as a lawmaker wannabe, you have to know a little bit about everything, and so it's hard to get in the weeds, pun intended, about things like a newer law like this that obviously it's not perfect right now, and hopefully we can get to the point that it's more clear. Hopefully we can make some good money that we need in this state. Like I said, bringing it back to my own district, I know Waterford Township could really benefit from some of the revenue. People are driving to Walled Lake, or they're going to Flint, or they're going to Ann Arbor, or Detroit, when they could be buying medicine right in their own community. And I think Waterford is starting to wake up, but hopefully a change of leadership in that township will also make a difference.
Question for you. Do you have Kent in the 11th district working hard to bring people into the district and provide you some more volunteers?
Kent has his hands very full, because he is trying to get Haley Stevens reelected. That's his main objective. But he also he was the chair of the Waterford Dems. Now he's the vice chair, but he's also, because we've had to move to online meetings and stuff, the current chair, she's in a age bracket that really is not comfortable running a Zoom meeting, so he's running the meeting. So he's got his hands really, really full. I know he's a strong supporter of mine. He's doing a great job, I think, for what he's, for all the responsibility he has. But I know that he is really working hard at Waterford. There's a new organization. It's very, very grassroots, and it's addressing the racism in Waterford. And I think that is going to make an impact in that community. There's
liberation. It could be a doorway, and from that doorway, and my help from the Democrats, maybe we can help people who are near your district or within reasonable drive to volunteer some phone banking or write a check.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like, they're not allowed to coordinate with candidates. That's why Michigan Liberation did knock on doors in the 15th precinct of Waterford Township, but I was not allowed to know that they were doing that. That's you cannot coordinate. So I was, like I said, I was honored to find out after the fact.
From Mike in Pontiac.
Mike Jackson?
No, Mike who's running for city council. McGinnis.
Yeah.
Mike McGinnis. Or at least anyone in the North County that can help you, including one of the Democratic clubs nearby, besides Waterford.
Well, I do belong to the North Oakland Democratic Club, but the chair is also running for the state house. So that kind of spreads that help kind of thin. So actually, the surrounding indivisible groups have been very helpful. The Fighting Nine, the 9th Congressional District and 11th District, they've been very, very helpful. Huron Valley Indivisible, they're also a very strong group. So I'm getting help from outside organizations. Like Invisible.
You could convert some of the Archie Bunker voters of my generation in your district. You could possibly win with a big blue wave from top to bottom of the ticket. We used to have a slogan: you can have straight voting. Make it emphatic, vote straight Democratic. Yeah. So we could oust Bouchard with Vince Gregory, a former Wayne County sheriff, opposing Bouchard. We could beat his his brand recognition or the habits of incumbent Republicans in Waterford, we could pull them under with our blue wave from the top of the ticket. So you'd have more of a chance of an upset because people will repudiate Republican Party, not just repudiate Trump, but repudiate the Republican Party, break ranks. One time I repudiated the Democratic Party. I was against the Vietnam War, and I voted third party in 1968 because Humphrey continued to support the Vietnam War. So there might be some deal breakers for some seniors up there. Is Trump willing to sacrifice everybody over 50 for his reelection? Is he willing to use us as collateral damage of the pandemic that he deliberately suppressed for 60 to 90 days, threatening my life? Is he out to throw me under the bus literally 10 years before I'll die? I'm pissed off. Maybe you can get some Archie Bunker people up in Waterford to let go of their redneck instincts and vote for a beautiful progressive woman.
Well, if Trump tries to throw you under the bus, just run away, because he can only get 2 or 3 steps before he passes out from exhaustion. So
yeah, he didn't do too well on the ramp the other day.
I noticed that.
Well, it's strange. Waterford Township, because like the way I check the temperature in Waterford, I follow their community Facebook pages, and there is a pretty strong anti-Trump sentiment rumbling through there, which is really surprising. But there is also an anti-Gretchen Whitmer sentiment as well. For some reason, they just couldn't get on board with some of her precautions. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I know that we are phone banking, so if anyone is interested in phone banking, that's about the only voter reach that's available right now. You can go to my campaign and fill out the volunteer form, and we have virtual. You can phone bank straight from home. We have Zoom. We gather on a Zoom meeting, and then we make calls together, and we share funny ideas. Like one of the funniest stories I came across when I phone banked on Sunday was I asked, typically when you ask a voter, like, what is their most important issue? And her most important issue was to make sure that those monuments stay up. So I found myself a strong racist right there in Waterford, but you never know. It's a mixed bag, and then you get a supporter for the next call. So it's interesting what people find important. The fact that we keep these Civil War monuments up isn't a most important thing to somebody. I found incredibly interesting, but it's a mixed bag down there. So
you can still have the Civil War going. We call it the cultural wars.
Forget hell.
This is the up south.
The up south, yeah.
There's Union forces there. They're safe with us.
Yeah. Well, it is true that some of the past continues to haunt us. We are always shaped by who we have been. America, at less than 300 years old, really still hasn't discovered its identity. If you look at European nations that have been continually occupied for thousands of years, they've worked through a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with, and they have a much more sedate culture. Their culture is much more abiding in most instances. So we're bravely walking into this very difficult time right now. And what's more brave than being alive now is trying to be a leader right now. So Nicole, thank you very much for trying to be one of those people that shapes a future in a way that we believe it should be.
thank you. And thank you for having me on today. I'm a big fan of Jamie Lowell. He, when I was Indivisible Leader, he came up and talked to our membership about Prop 1, and he gave a great presentation. And I think you came to the North Oakland Democratic Club, and I had something else going on that night, and I missed your presentation that night.
I did, and Rick did it. Rick basically took over on that one and did a great job. That was in Oxford.
Jamie Lowell
downtown
has
Oxford.
a huge following, just an enormous following for Jamie Lowell.
It's not easy being Jamie, that's for sure.
Well, and I don't know if you know this, but Jamie and I were in a quartet, a Hawaiian band quartet with our spouses.
Yes. We've heard tales. We have heard the tales. We've seen the ukulele and everything. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the organ.
And the organ. Well, the organ comes without saying. So.
And those dogs are the best dogs. So if you hop the fence and play with the dogs, they are the best dogs. So
yes.
We know the dogs. Yeah. The dogs are good.
They're so teeny.
There's the one. There's our favorite.
That's the one I haven't met. That's the one I've met.
Hopefully soon.
Zeta
Everything, if all
awesome.
the numbers stay looking good, we're moving forward and do more stuff.
Lady Zeta.
So Nikki, you're welcome to stay. Really appreciate you sharing and stumping here today, and hopefully you get some donations or some volunteers or some awareness at the very least. And I do hope that you do a historic unseating the 40-year stronghold on this seat. That would be quite
That would be
awesome.
awesome. Yeah.
Is anyone nervous of hold on. Is anyone nervous of what will happen if Trump does lose? When he loses?
Yes, we've talked about whether he will willingly leave the White House or whether he will claim that it was election fraud of somehow and that he has to push back another election and he must remain in charge until then. There has been a lot of speculation about that.
I don't even think he'll do something like I think even he, come on.
I'm worried about his supporters more than I live in a precinct where Democrats are outvoted 2-1. And so I'm a little nervous of where I live and north of me of the reaction to his loss. So
are they going to do some burning and looting out there?
Be like
Downtown
English hooligans
Clarkston,
after a bad football game. Yeah. Look, we saw in London some of the monuments to people associated with slavery in the colonial time damaged. We saw the statue of Nelson Mandela, the symbol of African American freedom and success in the face of despair. That was threatened. They were African. Well, you're right. Correct. Not African American. That's right. Yeah, just African. But
South Africa.
A lot of folks turned up to try and assault that thing, and they were really
in Germany too,
and armed. And this is in London, So there's definitely a counter movement.
Just a little side note. Nelson Mandela actually spoke in Detroit. He came to Tiger Stadium like a week after he was released. I was there and I took my kids.
I totally remember that.
What a moment. I mean, what a moment. I just got chills thinking about it.
I have the book A Long Walk Home. It's an impressive read.
Yeah, he's an incredible man.
So, just as a transition here, Nick, you might want to hang out for a second because there is some future connection to a discussion that we're going to have with Colin. Sometimes you step into the legislature for a long haul and ride like a new issue that comes out that requires several years of influence from lobbyists and who pays who and who influences who and all that kind of stuff. And some people are needed to champion these causes. We didn't end up being the best friends with them, but Representative Colton took on the cannabis issue, and originally with our organization early on, that changed hands several times via politics and all these various factors that go into lawmaking.
It's for gluttonous self-benefit on his point.
Yeah, but one of the next things that could happen is the legalization of things such as like mushrooms, psilocybin, and other things. And right now, Colin is with an organization called Decriminalize Nature, and they are working on it locally in Ann Arbor. And that's how statewide the cannabis laws statewide happened. The first few cities went, individually had initiatives and won by big majorities for like making it medical or for legalizing in some way or lowest level law enforcement. And now the issue of the well, he'll tell you, I keep on screwing up the name, the ethnocentric.
No, entheogenic.
There you go. Whatever. Take it away, man. Give her a little insight on what's going on in Ann Arbor, so she can get an idea of what may come in at her statewide after she's in the legislature for a little bit.
All right. For one, you don't have to answer any questions. I know you're a candidate, and there's probably not a stance in the Democratic Party, and your area is unaffected at this time. So, but I work with. Jim Salame was on the call earlier, and Julie Barron. We started a committee to decriminalize nature, which is entheogenic plants and fungi in Michigan, or not in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, the city of Ann Arbor. And so we're working with the city council right now to try and get that passed. It's first started in the city of Oakland, California. And Santa Cruz, California passed ordinance, and same with Berkeley, California. And there's ongoing, like, similar ballot committees across the country. I know
Denver and Chicago too, right?
Well, Denver passed like to legalize psychedelic mushrooms, but like Washington, D.C. is going to be voting on it in November, and there's Portland, Oregon, and it's made its way through a committee in the city of Chicago. So it's just trying to make it lowest law enforcement priority, similar to like what we kind of did in the cannabis world. We started in cities like Ann Arbor and Detroit, and moved across like Kalamazoo and Lansing.
Ypsilanti, Ferndale, Traverse City, Detroit.
Yeah, all of them. And Deb did a bunch in Oakland County near you. But yeah, it's just something that we're trying to make not a crime that like what we were like similar to cannabis. We don't want people going to jail for it or being charged with like a Schedule 1 substance for using something that could potentially be okay for them, or not typically harm them too hard to like at all. I mean, there's times where people do have bad trips, but for the most part, most people have good. And if you responsibly use it,
it's safe physically. The harm would be like doing something weird while having a weird trip, and not.
Yeah.
That would be the problem. Right. Okay. So a lot of people should do something like that under more of a controlled environment, and some of the people who he works with offer that.
Like you wouldn't want to drive under the influence of mushrooms or anything.
Exactly. Right. You need to be responsible about those types of realities.
Stuff like that.
Right.
And
But
really, your
most
first
of the time, you
experience
just
shouldn't be
wanna,
by yourself.
I mean, most people like don't really understand how to use mushrooms properly, and if they could just the community could create harm reduction methods of setting with a therapist, because a lot of people can use them for healing. I know that there's a lot going on with post-traumatic stress disorder right now, and the different types of psychedelics that are used for that, and different issues like cluster headaches and migraines, and yeah. But yeah,
it's really cool. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I saw a TV show where people took LSD, and then they were in a very safe environment, and then they had therapists on hand to kind of work through some of their traumas that they've experienced in life. And I thought it was really, really interesting to watch.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be like one of the next bigger things in mental health therapy, and it's coming. I don't think it's going to be like this year, but like in the next couple of years, there's probably going to be a lot more people talking about it. But I've also been talking with a lot of different state house representatives or candidates throughout. Like I'm from like Wayne County, so I talked to like Abdullah Hamoud. There's a candidate out in Canton. His name's Ranjiv Puri, I think. He's in the 11th district too. Talked to him about psychedelics, and of course Jeff Irwin and Yusuf Rabi and everyone out there. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Rep. Rabi. I very much support his Medicaid for All bill. Like, 'cause I get asked a lot, do you support Medicare for All? And my response is always that I support Representative Rabi's Medicaid for All bill, because that would be one I could vote on, not Medicare for All. So that seems to satisfy that question. But I think he's amazing, and he is a great representative, and I think there's big things ahead for him beyond the state legislature.
Well, and of course, Rep. Rabi stepped into the district that formerly was occupied by current Senator Jeff Irwin. So it certainly looks like that's a district he could hold for 3 consecutive terms, you know?
Yeah. He tells a great story when he ran for county commission, and he won by like a handful of votes. So he's a great leader in that area. So you guys are lucky to, whoever has him, they're lucky.
Yeah. He's a good communicator.
I'm not in his district, but he's been quite awesome about communicating with me and discussing serious strategies on issues and things like that. And we're happy to have him in the state working in the legislature for sure.
Rep. Robbie's spoken at my Michigan Cannabis Business Development conferences. Jamie and I host those, and he's spoken several times there. He's been on our radio show frequently. He's very candid. Whenever there's a new topic that comes up that we need to get the scoop on, he's available to us. And for a lot of times in our career, we had a lot of legislators who were making decisions and had influence that were not available to us, who we could never get on the phone, that would never wish to speak on their behalf. I think the whole concept that cannabis was this poison pill. Once you said yes, I like the idea of cannabis law reform, somehow you were tainted in the minds of your electorate. I hope to gosh that is gone now.
Same. Right. Yeah. It's like Jamie said, I'm a big supporter. It's just something I can't lead with.
Yeah. Oh.
Can't run at it.
Well, you just said you have a district that's predominantly Republican, and recognizing that that's a touchstone issue that's not got a lot of agreement amongst that particular group means it shouldn't be something that you lead with. No.
Right. And during the conversation, though, there has been some activity going on. There has been a lot of jobs created. There has not been a lot of issues at large with kids getting it or whatever the common concerns have been. So you can point out some things if you're able to get that far in a discussion.
And just talk money. There's revenue to be made.
I know. Well, every time a car leaves Oakland County to come up to Flint to buy some cannabis, or it leaves Oakland County to go to Wayne County to buy some cannabis because they can legitimately do it in those places, your community loses. And I know they hate to see people spending their money outside the city. It's a really big, powerful motivator. Jamie and I traveled across the state, for 2 separate campaigns for legalization. And we've spoken to, I don't know, at least 100 different local municipalities over that time. And, money talks. People really appreciate jobs, money, and public health.
And access. I mean, why, those who don't have a car, if they don't have the ability to get to Flint because mass transit is nowhere near their home, how do they get access to their medicine? I know, like right now, you can have things delivered because we have coronavirus around us. But, before that arrived, I don't know, was there a delivery service before that? Or would they deliver to Oakland County from Flint or Detroit?
Well,
yes, but it has just up and running and not necessarily functional in all areas. And
when you want to shop, you want to be able to talk to the the employee there and find out what is the best medicine for you. So having that resource in your community makes the most sense. And I hope that Waterford does wake up, because it would be a prime community for it. I mean, it's been there forever, and why not make money off of it, and why not provide a service to those who need it? Like I said, 14 out of 15. And the one person who stood up said he did all the talking points, like it can cause rage issues and all of this nonsense that we know is not true. But 14 out of 15 people stood up and said they wanted it. And it was more like for seizures and for anxiety. It was truly for medicine. I mean, and people want it in their community. They don't want it. They want to spend their money in their town.
They've been driving by Jerry Millen's greenhouse. They've been driving by Iron Labs. They've been driving by cannabis functioning facilities now for some time. And that really does sort of dispel some of the illusions that people may have had about the nature of the cannabis industry. It worked to Bill Schuette's advantage when he painted us as all pot shops where, nefarious things took place, and you would never let your daughter go into one of those pot shops because you know what probably happens behind those walls. Well, nowadays people have actually seen it in their community for quite some time. They've seen no issues with it. And there have been intelligent people representing the community interviewed by media regularly. So the impression they're getting from the industry, I'm hoping, is not one of fear. It's one of acceptance. These industries are legitimately just like any other. Mm-hmm. So, Jamie, what do you got there?
Well, we kind of got off track a little bit. I know that event in a minute. Colin at least will tell us about this event that's coming up on Saturday, for the DNA. But I just wanted to point out too, like, it seems as though because of that big process of cannabis having to be, worked for many years to kind of move the needle to where it is now, it has paved the way in a certain way for this next issue of the mushrooms and other natural plants. And similar, they're totally different things, but what is similar is that there's like many different kinds of mushrooms with different components and qualities, and people have different individual systems, and that matchup of certain things seems to make a difference in these treatments and stuff. And whenever it's decriminalized or legalized, more of those options become available, and the ability for people to be able to treat themselves with the right thing is easier. And meanwhile, it's, you know, as long as people are being responsible, which they can be with it, you know, adults should choose whether or not they want to use mushrooms, whether it's a micro dose for a little energy boost or health or peace of mind or however that works for people, or to actually take a trip for whatever reason responsibly.
Just for the cannabis thing, I'm sorry, go ahead, Colin. You finish up with mushrooms.
Did you want me to talk about the event that's coming up?
Yeah.
Yeah,
do.
so it's not Decriminalized Nature Ann Arbor. So it's the Michigan Psychedelic Society is hosting their monthly meeting, and it's going to be at Argo Park in Ann Arbor, and it's called Psychedelic Storytelling. And you have to wear a mask and sit 6 feet apart from everyone. If you'd want to share a story, I'm going to share a story. You can go to Michigan Psychedelics. You can send an email to Michigan Psychedelic Society at gmail.com. And it's from 6:30 to 8:30 at Argo Park again.
So testimonials, which is also how we
Yeah.
help move the cannabis issue forward.
You know, from 2008 to 2018, essentially, there were no legal cannabis retail establishments in Michigan, but yet we moved the needle of acceptance in the community for that industry a great deal because of the gray market or the black market industry that we had. We set the standard of quality and safety, and it really took a lot of people off guard. And by the time 2018 came around, many of those people that had been on the fence now believed our industry was ready to go.
I agree. Went from that questionable and felonious activity, especially in areas where they really wanted to enforce laws against it, to an essential service during the pandemic as a barometer for how far we've come.
And again, when we talked about Michael Thomas earlier, there are still people incarcerated. You know, Danny Trevino, when you start, there's a list of names you could start mentioning, people that can't be forgotten, that we have to continue to work to get out of jail. Because again, no one should go to jail for a plant. And Michael Thomas's sentence was cruel and inhumane for what actually happened. And so is Trevino's, actually, as far as I'm concerned.
And so it'll be made public, and Zahra Abbas will be on Planting Green Trees on Thursday night as representing the Democratic Cannabis Caucus, and we'll describe a letter that is being sent to the Attorney General that is about this very thing, including Michael Thompson and that type of those type of issues that persist. And also a letter is being sent to the governor as this new caucus reforms. But to get the ball rolling, that's how it's getting started. So we'll hear more about that Thursday night, 8 o'clock on Planet Green Trees TV.
There are some notable names signed onto that letter, some organizations here from the state that people will recognize. But that's an important aspect of activism. We've said for a long time, this is not over. Nobody quits. Everybody fights. This is not done. Just because we won an election in 2018 didn't mean that everything was going to be perfect from here on out.
Yeah, so Nick, I'm glad you're still here because I'll throw another one in here. We are continuously working against some of the bigger investors, the bigger resourceful organizations and individuals and companies in this industry, trying to kind of artificially corner, pieces of the market for themselves. Instead of there being more opportunity for more people, there's always this attempt to try to make something more restrictive or prohibitive, even for people operating in the licensed world, and just attempt to take over. It started off even as early as 2010.
I did mention a name. Is that I don't know if you remember the name that I mentioned.
I do. I remember that name.
One of those that you're referring to, or are they?
I don't know, and they could be. It doesn't mean that they're evil. There's a lot of people who understand how our system works in reality and are very good at working those systems and processes and making money on a big level, and
I just
all
think
that
they
kind
did
of stuff around. So
the presentation I saw in downtown Clarkston, I thought they did a good job of trying to bring a product into a community that normally wouldn't accept it, when they talk about it being a boutique and that you wouldn't be allowed into the facility without checking an ID first. And that was the pushback, was where people were like, what about the children? They're going to walk in front of it. Meanwhile, the next block, there's a party store where they have a wall of booze, so to me, the pushback is not legit, because
Sure. And as Rick pointed out, you can now, there's been 10 years of dispensaries working just fine in communities that accept them and have worked with them, that you can point to as an example of what happens.
That's typically what you described is what happened in every single city when we first entered the city. It was always, what about the kids? What about the this? What about the that? And it's very easy to say, this is the facts. This is no problem. This hasn't had an issue in another community. You can point it out, but that's a well-trod road. We've heard all those stories, all those excuses.
The Marijuana Regulatory Agency has strict restrictions over what you can put in the front window of your establishment too. You cannot display product. You cannot have illustrations that you can't have.
Labels
pricing.
can't be attractive to kids.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Lots
Correct.
of things in place for that.
There's many stair steps that they've taken to make sure that children aren't in danger.
And when you have a store where you require ID, you reduce the chances of the kids being able to get it. Just like a kid can't walk into a liquor store and buy cigarettes and liquor right now.
Well,
you cannot walk into a dispensary.
They're what they are concerned about. Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. What they're concerned about are the facilities in operation that aren't licensed and they're not paying their taxes. They're hoping to close some of those loopholes.
I believe those have all been closed down. So
yeah, and
most of them,
and that there might be something to be said for that. Now, personally, I don't mind any of that activity at all. I think the pie is pretty big. Either. It's just cannabis. Who really cares? But it's true that under the system, without a license, for those who are jumping through all these hoops, paying all this money, they take a little, issue with that. The distinction for me, for sure, though, is those places, when being looked at for being shut down, don't have to be shut down by way of like paramilitary invasions and raids. It can be done civilly. If they don't shut down by telling them to shut down, a lock can be put on that door and that building can be shut down for up to a year without any of that other crap.
You can use a nuisance rule instead of a SWAT team raid. But I have to say, I mean, considering where you're talking about, Clarkston, the middle of Oakland County, I can't imagine that there are any
like a blind pig for cannabis or something. This would be better.
Just at large, like the clubs in Flint or Detroit or something like that. She means.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. These don't exist in where I live.
Okay.
They were out of town, but I'm just like that's who they're focusing on when they're reaching out to lawmakers. They want these because they're paying their taxes. They're paying a lot of money to have a facility that's pleasant to the eye. And moving into these more conservative neighborhoods, so they just are. I guess they're carving out their space a little more clearly. I guess.
Let me just put in focus, since you are a candidate for office. Let me just give you an alternate philosophy on that. Okay, those people entered into an industry where the existing businesses you're talking about were already existent. They are trying to push out people that have already been there before they were there. So if a community has tolerated those industries for a long time and a new guy comes in and says, hey, I don't think we should tolerate them anymore, you should probably look at that guy and say, shut up, okay? Because the fact is they've got plenty of advantage already over the 1 or 2 or 3 operations that are going, especially in Genesee County. It seems like those people came into a situation where they knew what the rules were. They already knew what was going on beforehand, and now they're trying to change the rules and change the circumstances.
Well, it's also an exposure of their lack of understanding of kind of what's going on. This pie is big enough for all that stuff. They can concentrate, instead of worrying about that stuff, on providing the product at a high quality, at a good price, competitively, and they work their own thing and do much better than worrying about this other stuff. But they do.
They're opening, I don't know if it's already open, but they opened a recreational facility in East Lansing.
Lots of great progress going on.
Which is a great location. So that was a good.
Yeah,
sport
that
on
is a
their
good
part.
spot.
So they,
You know it.
so they're working it professionally. The problem is there's like Green Peak who owns, I think they're like one of the biggest in the state, and they came in similarly without real understanding of the culture and the nature of the plant and made some really stupid decisions.
Yeah, a lot of blunders, public blunders, and they tried to walk stuff back, and it's too late. And
I've read in Marijuana Business Daily the other day, a company called Red, White, and Bloom claims that they own 22% of Michigan's cannabis market already. One company, 22%. Now that's the people that have talked about selling them to High Times for the new branded cannabis stores they're going to open. But that's frightening.
They're just going to sell CBD or something?
So they're going to sell CBD things carried over from their Illinois facility, but it looks like they're also going to seek medical and adult use licenses in the state of Michigan, which is the only business model that works. A CBD only store, even with High Times name on it, that's going to be a tough business to keep afloat.
I would say so. That's a hobby business. You're not going to go any further with it, I believe.
Right. And CBD is so saturated within the market itself.
Yep.
If you're exclusively that product line, I think you're really in trouble as far as a business model goes. Diversifying,
Definitely.
especially considering the huge financial upside of being able to get a medical or an adult use license in Michigan. So how are we doing on time, Jamie? We close?
Hey, we're just about ready to wrap up, but this has been a really good conversation, and really appreciate everybody's involvement. Too bad we lost Jim, but he was hanging out with Shelly and Julie, and those guys are having fun somewhere out in the country on a lake.
I was jealous the whole time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure that's good. Looks like Dr. Detroit is on, but he's kind of like just slipped off the side for a minute.
Just snoozing.
Hey, so if anybody's got anything to add, anything coming up or anything, please throw it in now. Otherwise, we will call it a wrap. And I really appreciate everybody's involvement in this discussion today. Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Thanks a lot, Derek.
Derek, you got anything, Derek?
Derek's been so quiet.
He has been.
I just got back from up north, celebrating my 6th anniversary with Lauren. So happy anniversary, Lauren.
Wow.
Happy
Where's Lauren?
She's somewhere around here. But I just want to say everybody should do what they can to get up north and enjoy the northern parts of our state this summer. It is gorgeous up there. It's a completely different reality than what it is down here. So it was an awesome little break, and it doesn't take much to get up there. They just opened a campsite in what's it called, Hoxeyville, where they are allowing cannabis consumption. So it's a big deal. Everybody's talking about it. They've got a group bonfire pit where people are staying. I heard 6 feet apart from each other. Something to look into.
New world stuff.
Wow.
We can keep on moving forward as long as the numbers stay good. And Michigan's fortunately looking good at the moment. So hope that lasts.
Goodbye on that happy note. It's been nice to spend some time this afternoon with everybody. I'm honored to be with you guys.
Thank you, Mike. It was a great show. Appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
We said hey.
All right. Thank you guys very much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Nicole.